24 hours later, after Cody Bellinger opted in with the Cubs, it's time to actually take a look at how this impacts Jed and his decisions for 2025. I know a lot of you are on the fence about if this is a good decision or not. Some of you are not on the fence. Some of you are way past the fence, and that's okay. But now let's see what exactly this is going to do for the team moving forward. Well, what a difference a year makes, right? About a year ago, Cubs convention was about to start. Everyone was waiting for the Cubs to re-sign Cody Bellinger. And then when it finally did happen at spring training, it was like a holiday. Everyone and their mom, even though it was midnight in Chicago, is getting the news in an uproar, excited. And now with Cody Bellinger re-signing, there's so many out there that are like, no, we could have done so much more with that money. Some of you as well also saying, no, I'm really excited. So there's a lot of people that are on different sides of this, and only time will tell if this is a good decision. Of course, it wasn't a decision that the Cubs made. It was a decision that Cody Bellinger made. But now there's a lot of decisions that have to be made in reaction to this. So I want to show you payroll. I want to show you some of the free agents that are available out there, and I want to propose basically what the Cubs can do if they are going to get kind of close to that luxury tax number again here in 2025. So let's start this conversation out on Fangraphs. This is really the best place to find out where the Cubs are at in payroll. You can see estimated 2025 payroll is $193 million. The luxury tax threshold in 2025 is going to be $241 million. $237 was the number in 2024, and that really was the magic number that everyone was looking at before the season started. How much money do the Cubs have to deal with? And so if you look at that number, really we're looking at about $48 million. But the real number, the true number right now is where it stands when you add up basically all the factors, right? It's the players' AAVs, it's the arbitration eligible, it's the non-arbitration eligible, it's the estimated salaries, it's the benefits that get paid out. There's so many different factors. It's not just as cut and dry as who's on the 26-man roster and who isn't. That comes out to $198 million, and that's where you find, essentially, if you do the math, about $43 million worth of payroll at this point is what is available. Now, there's going to be a lot of things that change here during the offseason that don't make that such a black and white number. So if we look at it, and especially when you look at some of these guys, I don't imagine Jimmy Herget. I don't even know who Jimmy Herget is. Maybe he had a couple innings with the Cubs. That name doesn't sound familiar. You don't imagine Colton Brewer is going to be on there. Trey Wingenter, not going to be on there. Adbert Alzolay is going to be out the entire season, so not sure what's going to happen there. Patrick Wisdom, Nick Madrigal, is it time to part ways with them? Is Mike Tauchman going to be here? Is Yency Almonte, Christian Bethancourt? A lot of these question marks, right, which is probably going to bring the actual number down here if we don't re-sign every single one of those players. Let's just assume for the arbitration eligible, that goes down a decent amount. Maybe they get rid of some of the non-arbitration eligible, and suddenly it's now, call it, instead of $43 million, $50 to $55 million available. And that's really where I'm going to make some of these assumptions from today. So if we look at that, now we have to look at where are the holes in the roster and where's the flexibility in the roster. That's what everyone's talking about right now. This signing with Cody Bellinger makes it feel like this roster is no longer flexible because of A, the logjam in the outfield, and B, the salary that kind of ate up there. So, but I mean, let's be honest, 50 to 55 million is still a decent amount to work with this offseason. It just, as usual, means that we can't go after the big guy like Juan Soto, and even going after a quote-unquote superstar feels like a little bit of a stretch if you're trying to balance this entire roster. So, positionally, 1 through 9, who's out there? Well, they're pretty much all locks. There's not really a place that you say, hey, we can upgrade. Aside from catcher, maybe, Miguel Amaya still was a 1.9 WAR catcher, which is pretty decent for considering that was his first full season as a Cub. So you look at that and you say maybe that's the spot, but you got Happen left with a no-trade clause. You got PCA. He's not going anywhere. He's going to get probably every start in center if he is healthy. You got Bellinger in right field now. Third base, I don't feel like Isaac Paredes is going to part ways. I don't think the Cubs are going to look at him as a trade target unless they can replace that with a superstar. So, especially with his track record, I mean, he deserves a second chance, I believe. 30 home runs a couple years ago, as well as a solid defender for a track record. We didn't see that with the Cubs, but I think for that reason, the Cubs are going to give him another shot. Dansby Swanson locked in through 2029. Nico Horner, I've talked about it. A lot of other people have talked about it. This feels like the only obvious place the Cubs would make a quote-unquote shocking trade, just due to the fact that Matt Shaw and James Triantos and some other infielders are primed and ready to come up to the majors. Whether you agree with it or not, it's really the only spot that you look at on this roster that there's flexibility with the contract and some flexibility in terms of what could replace that. So there's a potential position that's not locked in. You got Michael Busch at first base. I know everyone's talked about Pete Alonso, but Pete Alonso is expensive. He's had regression. Michael Busch is coming off of a rookie year where his WAR was higher than Pete Alonso, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to go out and pay 20 to 30 million for a guy that's not going to be as good from a wins above replacement standpoint as Michael Busch. As mentioned, Miguel Amaya, there needs to be a second catcher. Whether that ends up being the starting catcher or a backup catcher for Miguel Amaya is to be seen. And then the DH is Seiya Suzuki. So there's your starting 9. Backups are going to be a second catcher, as mentioned. That's an opening spot. 2 infielders, I see it being probably Miles Mastrobuoni. As much as that makes me cringe, I just don't think that they're going to stray away from him yet. He's cheap. He's under team control. And then either Shaw or Triantos, most likely, not necessarily breaking with the team, but I would say the majority of the year, a Shaw or Triantos as that, next infielder, maybe getting some spot starts as well. Outfielder, you got Owen Casey, you got Mike Tauchman. So those are your backups. Essentially, those 4 positions: 1 catcher, 2 infielders, 1 outfielder. Starting pitchers: Justin Steele, Shota Imanaga, Jameson Taillon, probably Javier Assad. And then you've got some 5th spot open there. If it's internal, it's going to be someone like a Ben Brown, a Jordan Wicks, or a Hayden Wesneski. And then from there, I don't think that's what they're going to do for the starting pitching. I do think that 5th spot is going to be open for another pitcher on the free agent market or through a trade to come in. And then from a reliever standpoint, you've got Ben Brown. Maybe Cade Horton comes up right away. We're probably going to have 8 relievers, so I think he will stay in AAA for a little bit, so that'll probably be there for Hayden Wesneski instead. Julian Merriweather, I think that if he gets healthy, he's going to be back in, and he's going to be a big part of the bullpen as well. Porter Hodge isn't going anywhere. He's coming back in. Nate Pearson, if he can build off of 2024. Yency Almonte, maybe. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him, but I think they would. I think they would definitely keep him on the team. And then Jordan Wicks probably is going to be in the bullpen with the lack of lefties at this point. They need a lefty in the bullpen. I don't know if Jordan Wicks is the guy, but that leaves an 8th spot open if those are your 7 relievers. So the obvious openings here are 1 starter, 1 reliever, and 1 catcher. Those are the obvious openings. But the places that they could get creative and upgrade is a second reliever, maybe a second starter. Right now, Javier Assad is your 4th starter, and we saw in 2024 the lack of depth that he brings to the starting rotation. He brings a lot of flexibility from a swingman perspective, but he never relieved in 2024, and I think we expected him to do a lot of relief appearances in 24. I would love to see a second starter come in, either internally or externally. Again, maybe it's a Ben Brown, maybe it's a Cade Horton, or free agents that make that second starter so that Assad can be slotted into the bullpen. And now you've got a really solid swingman or a long reliever in Javier Assad in the bullpen. And you make room for a superstar bat. I don't care what happens. I know that a lot of us don't really believe that Jed is going to be bold enough to go out there and get that. But just like the Craig Counsell thing kind of fell into Jed's lap, let's assume for a second a superstar bat reaches out and says, and their agent says, hey, he wants to be a Cub. You just find a way, right? You find a way to make it happen. Well, what's available? Well, I've got a video that I did recently from the free agent market side that shows you exactly what is available. It just popped up on your screen here. I'll put it in the description as well. You can go through everything of where you can see exactly what's available. I'm scrolling through some here, and you can see as I'm scrolling through, ignore all the stupid Google ads that are popping up for you here. Guys like Marcelo Zuna and Alex Bregman and Blake Snell and Garrett Cole, who probably, even as I'm recording this, is going to re-sign with the Yankees. A lot of different superstars potentially. But here's what I propose is the most realistic outcome. If the Cubs are going to spend anywhere, I think it's going to be on a starting pitcher. I think they will go out and they will get a bona fide ace to take pressure off of Justin Steele to be an ace, to give Shota Imanaga the opportunity to be just the best second starter in the league. And if you can see Justin Steele going back to being a number 3 starter, think about that for a second. I think it's Max Fried. I think Dansby Swanson has a great relationship with Max Fried. I think they're great friends, and I think with as much as Dansby is in the ear of Jed and Carter, he's probably going to say Max is our guy. So please make it happen, Jed. And right now, I would say a 4-year contract at $25 million a year with maybe an option for the 5th year for a guy that's going into age 31 year is a reasonable contract. I think that he would get maybe that $25 million. I might be heading the clouds there. It might be closer to $30 million with what he's been able to accomplish with the Braves. But I think if Dansby's able to talk with him, I think maybe they can get it down just a little bit to be more affordable for Jed. Now let's take a look at the relief pitcher market. The problem with relief pitchers in the free agency market, as you can see from age, it's just a lot of old dudes this year. And yeah, Jed's been good at getting some meat out of some veterans, squeezing out that last bit of juice that they have and making a trade, but that's not where the Cubs are at now. They need someone that's going to be there for a couple years. So I've got my eye on 2 guys here. It's going to be AJ Minter and Phil Maton. AJ Minter going into age 32 season, and Phil Maton also going into age 32 season. Last year, Phil and AJ were paid about the same in the $6 to $6.5 million range. Maybe we can say, hey, how about a 2-year, $7.5 million per year contract for either one of those guys? Now, Phil does have a club option for $7.8 million with the Mets coming up. So for that reason, I do think it's more likely that he re-signs with the Mets, especially with as deep as they got in the playoffs. They probably are mutually going to want to have that happen. And so AJ Minter, I mean, that would be a legit signing to me. If we look at AJ's numbers over the last couple seasons, he did deal with a little bit of some of the injury bug this year, but his worst year in the last few years was in 2023, where he had a 3.76 ERA and was in 70 games. So, that's essentially Drew Smyly, which is, I know, doesn't appeal to a lot of people. However, with the strikeout weapon, 82 strikeouts in 64 innings. But then this year, 2.62 ERA in 34 innings, he struck out 35 batters. This is a guy that I think from a left-handed, high-leverage position in the bullpen is a guy that fills a huge need. Might be more like $8 or $9 million per year for an AJ Minter, but I sure hope that Jed will change some things, change his approach, and actually go and do exactly that. He did that with Neris last year. It didn't work out, but I think that was because of an age, and also there's some rumors going around that he was kind of pressured into making that call. With AJ Minter, you don't have to get pressured into making that call. He's legitimate. Catcher, Danny Jansen. Let's take a look at him just really quick here. Look at his numbers for 2024. It's not going to just like jump out at you here on the page. I mean, if we compare him to Miguel Amaya was a better, from a numbers perspective, wins above replacement perspective, he was better than Danny Jansen. 1.9 WAR from Amaya, 232 batting average, and a 82 OPS plus, where Jansen a tick higher on the OPS plus, but 205 batting average and a .7 WAR. But I mean, when you look at him from the last few seasons, in 23, 1.6 WAR, 22, 2.9 WAR, 21, and 1.3 WAR. But check out the slug numbers in 21 and 22 and 23, all above 470. Love that. Get some pop out of your catcher position. I think if you can look at that and say, hey, we think that he just had a down year, especially with the Red Sox. Once he moved over to the Red Sox, it was not so good. So if they were to offer Jansen, say, a 2-year contract, maybe $7.5 million, and an option for the third year, I think that's reasonable. And then let's have some fun. Let's talk about a superstar. So when you look at free agents and you see the superstars and you see who would you make room for, the guy that stands out to me is Alex Bregman. And Bregman is a guy that you just find a way to make room for. He's going into his age 31 season. He's probably going to want somewhere between 5 to 7 years. Each of the last 3 years, he's been a 4 WAR or above player. In 21, he only played 91 games, so you can't really count that. We don't count 2020, obviously. 2019, an 8.9 WAR, was second runner-up for MVP. He's had 4 seasons where he's been in the MVP votes. This last year, another solid year where he had 26 home runs, OPS plus at 118, OPS 768. There's been regression, especially from the slugging perspective. There's definitely been some regression. But, and I think the bigger thing that sticks out to me is he only walked 44 times here in 2024, where in the past he's been in the top of the league in walks. So you can see he probably got a little bit out of his routine in 2024. But I believe Scott Boras is his guy. I think this is a guy that you just say, listen, we're going to have to send Isaac Paredes packing. We wanted to give him a second chance, but Bregman is falling into our laps. He wants to be a Cub. He wants to play for the Cubs. Something to that effect. You make room for him, and it's going to cost you at least $30 million a year, I believe. So realistically, you're probably in the 30 to 35 per year, 5 or 6 years. Maybe you can add in some club options there so that it protects you a little bit. Please don't do a no-trade clause like you've done with so many guys in the past, Jed. But that leaves basically 2 scenarios because you can't have both of those. If you do, you're going to go over the tax threshold. So scenario 1 is Fried plus Maton and Minter plus Jansen at $39.5 million for an AAV. That keeps you at least $10 million under where I believe you're going to be, which gives you a little bit of flexibility to maybe go pick up another bench guy or maybe pick up another reliever. And then scenario B, you've got Maton or Minter plus Jansen plus Bregman at about $45 million, and that brings you to pretty much right at the tax threshold, leaves you a little bit of room for the trade deadline as well. Either one of these I really like. Either way, that's about what we have left to spend. And I do believe, honestly, if I look at this, I do think this is a pie-in-the-sky kind of situation. I don't think that either one of these ends up being the way. I think that instead of 3 or 4 guys, Jed probably goes out and gets 5 or 6 guys that were like, well, maybe if they do this well and the floor is going to be a little bit lower, the ceiling's going to be a little bit lower, but, you know, the potential there for 5 or 6 guys to perform well spreads the risk is how he'll probably justify all that. So either way, it's kind of a weird position to be in, and this just shows me that there's going to be trades that need to be made. There's going to be some people that are disappointed in the trades. There's going to be some either MLB guys or some free or some prospects that are going to be in those trades, and for that reason, it's going to be a weird, and I keep saying confusing offseason, but that's really the best word I have for it, because when some of these guys that you're excited about or that had good years are shipped off, it's going to leave you with some confusing feelings, a lot like this feeling right now with Bellinger. Maybe you're not confused. Maybe you're fully on board that you either love it or you hate it. But for me, I'm left a little bit confused. So let me know what you think in the comments. What should Jed do with the about $50 million that he has available to him? And do you see this the same? Do you see it differently? Let me know. Thanks for checking this out. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not.